and try to understand all the concepts very clearly. If there is any difficulty, you ask me, and if you do your daily work, you will be getting very good grade. There is no doubt. So, is there any difficulty in what we have discussed till now? How many students are there by the 3:30? Okay. Anyway, they must be coming. Fine. So it's 9. So let me know if there is any difficulty so far. No difficulty? Okay. Is my voice clear to you, or I should speak more loudly, or
Yes, sir, you
whatever
are
you...
clear.
Clear,
Okay.
sir. Loud and clear,
And
sir.
you can see my lips and face.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Very good. So let us start then. And let me share the screen. So share the screen here, and then I come here. So what are you seeing on the screen now?
The folder lecture.
At a folder only, okay.
Gaussian approximation
Right,
dispersion.
right. So page number 41 you are seeing?
No, sir.
No,
No,
sir,
no, sir.
lecture notes
We are
folder.
seeing
Okay,
lecture
okay,
notes.
I'm
And
sorry.
the
Okay,
PDF
so
files
I have,
we are able
so
to
I
see.
have to do it again. I think I have to do it 2 times only, then it comes. Okay. Now page 41.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. So this is the today's topic. So last time, let me see what we had discussed. So, right. Okay, so we had discussed first the power carried. Sorry, moment. We had discussed the modal field patterns. Then we had discussed how to identify them. Then we had discussed the Poynting vector. How do we calculate the power carried by ELP mode? And then we discussed the excitation of mode. And as we had seen in the case of planar waveguide also, so excitation, how much power is coupled, or what is the amplitude of a particular mode excited when you launch certain a light beam at the input end of the waveguide. That is basically decided by the overlap integral between the incident field and the modal field pattern. So I have written that expression again here. So that amplitude of LM mode, LPLM mode, when a field phi R of phi is incident at the input end of the waveguide, that is given by this expression. And you may remember there was something in the denominator also, but the denominator was just integral psi lm star r dr d phi, and I am assuming that they are normalized wave functions, so that would become 1. So this is basically the overlap integral between this. Now one thing should be clear from here, that if my incident field phi r phi that exactly matches with the modal field pattern psi lm r phi, then ALM, this amplitude of that particular mode would be 1, and all the power would be coupled to that particular mode, and all other modes, amplitude of all other modes would be 0, because they are orthogonal. So if your incident field matches with one of the field pattern, this is an important observation, although it is obvious, I mean, for most of you, but some of you may not have noticed this. So now, as I will discuss, that we have fibers which support a large number of modes. They are known as multi-mode fibers or multi-mode waveguides. Then we have waveguides which support only fundamental mode. We have single mode waveguide. And as you know, and you will see that single mode fibers are very, very important. The reason is, as I discussed earlier also, and I will discuss later also, that if there are large number of modes, then dispersion is quite large because different modes propagate with different group velocity. And please unmute yourself. Everybody should unmute yourself. There is some noise. Now, right. So single mode fiber are very useful, particularly in communication, because there is no intermodal dispersion. So dispersion is very, very small. And now we require a lot of, many places we require their modal field pattern, their dispersion characteristics for single mode fiber. So for example, I tell you one particular situation. When you lay down a single mode fiber for communication purposes, it is possible that the fiber is broken at some point, and then some engineer has to go and join these two fibers, splice the two fibers together. So then that splicing, that what would be the loss at that splice, that is basically decide the modal field pattern, that how the modal field pattern of the one fiber piece and with the another fiber piece is overlapping. Unless they are actually aligned exactly, then there will be a lot of loss. And this calculation can be done only using the overlap integral of the modal field pattern. So we require how the modal field pattern in mathematical expression for modal field pattern. And as you know, for the fundamental mode, for all the modes, it is given by Bessel function in the core, Hankel function in the cladding. So for persons which are not very much trained in the field, handling these Bessel functions and etc., they are a bit difficult. Fortunately, for fundamental mode, the modal field pattern is very, very close to a Gaussian function. And Gaussian function is the easiest function to handle mathematically. So what we do, we define, we find out a Gaussian approximation to the modal field pattern. And by Gaussian approximation, I mean that we generally represent in this approximation, we represent the modal field pattern, which is, for example, for fundamental mode, it is given radial part. Phi part is not there actually. So radial part is J0 UR by A by J0 in the core, K0 WR by A by K0 in the cladding. If you plot it, it is very nearly a Gaussian function. So what we try to find out in Go, we find out a Gaussian function which best which matches the R of R in the best possible way. Now I will discuss how will we do it. And the recipe I have already basically discussed, that this overlap integral, if this phi of R of I corresponds to the fundamental mode, then the amplitude of the fundamental mode would be 1. All the power would be coupled to that. So what I will do, I will find out a Gaussian function. Gaussian function, you know, that is exponential minus R square by omega W square. So, and I will find out that value of W for which this overlap integral is maximum. And in any case, I should consider the normalized form, because if I do not consider the normalized form of a Gaussian function, I take the amplitude to be very large, then this overlap integral would be very large actually. It may be even more than 1. So now you understand what we are going to do. So in the Gaussian approximation, we find the closest Gaussian function which matches with R of R of the fundamental mode, which is given by this. So let the best Gaussian function is given, is given by B exponential minus R square by W square. So this is say phi of R. And W is known as the Gaussian spot size, right? So Gaussian spot size, let me, yeah. So, and what I will do, I will find out the value of W for which the overlap integral of this function with the modal field pattern of the fundamental mode is maximum. So first of all, we normalize both these functions, because unless we do not normalize, then if you take the value of a and b arbitrarily, then overlap integral can be, I mean, very, very large. I mean, it does depend on a and b actually. So that's not the correct way. So we will first normalize this. So r of r square r dr, I normalize in this fashion. This gives me a is equal to 1 upon under root integral r of r mod square r dr. And similarly, if you integrate the Gaussian or normalize the Gaussian function, then b comes out to be 1 upon under root integral exponential minus 2r square by w square r dr. And now if you calculate the overlap integral, that overlap integral is basically this thing. So this is the product of the two functions in the numerator and integral, and these are the normalization factors. And by the way, this is also the coupling efficiency. If you launch a Gaussian beam at the input end of a fiber, then this is the coupling efficiency from the Gaussian beam to the fundamental mode. Overlap integral is nothing but the amplitude of the mode and square of the amplitude of, I mean, that gives you the power actually. So this is not, eta square would be coupling efficiency basically. So this is the amplitude of the fundamental mode when a Gaussian beam of spot size W is launched at the input end. And in that Gaussian approximation, we find out that value of W for which eta is maximum. So do you understand that how do we find out Gaussian approximation? So if you do that, now people have given empirical relations that if you select W Gaussian spot size in this form, I mean, this is the best Gaussian function is given by the spot size of the best Gaussian function, which represent the fundamental mode of a optical fiber, step index optical fiber, that is given by this equation. This is an empirical formula, but it gives a very, very good estimate when V lies between 0.8 and 2.5. 2.4048 is the mode cutoff of the first higher order mode. So single mode region is only when V is less than 2.4048. And generally we do not have, I mean, single mode fiber, we do not operate when V is less than 0.8. Actually, we generally operate when V is of the order of 2. And we do not operate very close to 2.4048 because there may be some manufacturing errors, and maybe at that point your next higher order mode is excited. So if you really want that your fiber is working in the single mode region, and at the same time you want that its V parameter should be as large as possible, so we generally operate around V is equal to 2.2, 2.3 or 2.1, but not I mean more than very close to 2.4, right? So why I'm telling you this, that for all practical purposes, this formula is a very, very good approximation for step index fiber. And as I already told, there are several applications of model to know the modal field pattern, and one of the important application is in splicing loss. So whenever a fiber, when you, in many applications, you have to join two fibers together. So for example, if you have very long fiber communication link, maybe say 100 kilometer or 200 kilometer, but you do not have a fiber a single length of 100 or 200 kilometer, so you may require to join, splice many single mode fibers, and they may have slightly different modal field patterns. So the question is that when we join these two fibers, So you may not be able to join them perfectly. The ideal situation would be that the two fibers are joined in such a way that there is no misalignment between the two fibers. They are 100% aligned. But when you do it, in practice, you can have these type of misalignments. You can have a longitudinal misalignment, that there is some small gap between the two ends of the fiber when you splice this, or there is a transverse misalignment, or there may be angular misalignment. The splice machine which we have, in fact, angular misalignment is not a real problem actually. Yeah, but anyway, we will consider this also. And longitudinal misalignment is also not a very big problem. Basically, if there is some gap between the two fiber ends, so what will happen from the output end of the first fiber? So when field would come out, so within a very small region, and this would be very small region, the field would diffract, so its size will change little bit, and then it will enter into the second fiber, and that would give you some loss. So even if the two fibers are identical, because of this longitudinal gap, some loss would be there, because the field pattern in traveling this air gap would not remain the same because of diffraction effect. But anyway, I mean, this would be very small generally, though it's not a very big problem. But transverse misalignment is a problem. And in the design of this splicing machine, knowledge of transverse misalignment is very important. You should know while designing a splicing machine that how much loss is created by if the two axes are misaligned by a certain amount. So what are my tolerances in transverse misalignment? Whether suppose I have a tolerance of say 0.1 dB in the loss. So I should find out that what is that misalignment which will cause 0.1 dB loss, right? And similarly, this angular misalignment is also possible, that the two fibers are slightly joined at slightly at angle. So I will first discuss the transverse misalignment. So suppose the two fibers are transversely misaligned and their axes are separated by a distance xi. So the direction of misalignment, I take the direction x-axis, and the perpendicular direction I am taking y-axis. So naturally, in this coordinate system, the misalignment would be only in the x direction. And so let me start with a general case. Suppose the two fibers are not identical and W1 and W2 are their spot sizes, Gaussian spot sizes. And I will always use normalized form of functions. Only then the overlap integral would be less than 1, or maximum it would be 1. So the normalized form of Gaussian function for fiber 1, that is given by this. And this normalization, how I have done? Psi1, okay, I have shown it here. No, okay, normalization I have done that integral psi1 star dx dy, and integral over minus infinity to plus infinity on both x and y, that is equal to 1. Similarly, psi2 is also normalized. And so these are the normalized form, and psi2 for the second fiber, because axis is not aligned and there is a misalignment xi, so this will be described by x minus xi square plus y square. And now you can find out that how much, if unit power is propagating through the first fiber, then what would be the power coupled to the second fiber. So this what I have done, I have written the overlap integral of the two fields, and this would give me the amplitude, and square, that is basically the power coupled. So this is the transmission factor T, how much power, fractional power will be coupled from one fiber to another fiber. And fortunately, this can be evaluated analytically. This integral is given in that book, Optical Electronics, by Professor Ghatak and Tyagarajan. So you can go through it, and it is a standard integral you get in this, and you can integrate it actually easily. So now you can see that if there is a, if the two axes of the two fibers are misaligned by a distance xi, then this is the power which would be coupled from one fiber to another fiber. So as expected, if the misalignment is 0, then the maximum power will be coupled to this. This is the case when the two fibers are different. Their Gaussian spot sizes are different. So this is the maximum power would be coupled. And you can find out the loss. So when xi is equal to 0, what is the loss? We generally define in terms of dV, and that loss would be minus 10 log of this quantity, twice W1 W2 upon W1 square plus W2 square whole square. Or you can write down minus 20 log 10 basis 2 W1 W2 upon W1 square plus W2 square. If you have identical fibers, I mean some fiber link is broken and one splice it, but there is a misalignment of xi, then in that case when W1 is equal to W2 is equal to W, then the transmission loss would be given by exponential minus xi square by W square. So this is the power coupled to the, in fact this equation gives a very simple way, experimental way to find out the Gaussian spot size of a single mode fiber. So what you can do is you can take two single mode fibers and you can put them on V groove, and so that they are stable, and you can move one fiber with respect to the other fiber, and you measure the distance with the help of a micrometer screw, and you can sort of let me see if my this video, I mean this another whiteboard is working, then I will show you how you can. Anyway, let me come first to next slide. So this equation 2, by the way, that all, as I discussed earlier, it also gives the coupling efficiency of a Gaussian beam. That if the input end of the fiber, a Gaussian beam is launched of a spot size W, then this is how, this is the fractional power which would be coupled to the fiber. So that is the coupling efficiency also. And you can also find out loss in terms of dV. So that would be minus 10 log 10 exponential minus xi square by W square. And you can put it in this form. This is, this would come out to be right. 10 into log 10 base E into xi upon W square, right? So one thing should be clear from here, that, and which is obvious, that larger is the value of W, greater would be, I mean less would be the loss, and greater would be the tolerance towards transverse misalignment. But from this equation, one may tend to think that if I can keep on increasing W, so my tolerance with respect to transverse misalignment would keep on increasing. Well, that is true, but there are other things also. And later on sometime we will discuss bending loss in optical fiber, and you will find that larger is the this Gaussian spot size, larger would be the bending loss. And another thing is, as you will see that if you increase W, then tolerance with respect to angular misalignment, that becomes that degrade actually. So loss, as you increase W, so loss with respect to angular misalignment increases. I am not going to derive this, and by the way, this is given in both these books, Optical Electronics by Ghatak and Tyagarajan, or Introduction to Fiber Optics. by Ghatak and Tyagaraja. In both the books, they have given as a sole example, right? So this is the loss in dB due to angular misalignment. If theta is the angle between the two axes of fiber 1 and fiber 2, then this is the loss because of angular misalignment, minus 4.34 pi NL. NL is the this index, refractive index between the two fibers. You can put some index matching liquid. So times W, Gaussian spot size, and times theta. Theta is in radians divided by lambda whole square. So this is the, so you can see that if W increases, then loss with respect to angular misalignment increases. So one loss decreases, another loss increases. So a smaller value of W, greater tolerance of angular misalignment. On the other hand, a smaller value of W, less tolerance with respect to transverse misalignment. So this is sort of a constant product. Their product is constant. So if you calculate the hello.
Sir, sorry to interrupt, but uh, like
Bolo.
I want to ask about the dependence of W.
Uh,
Like in
yeah,
angular misalignment is directly proportional to W square.
yeah,
So the smaller value of W will correspond to the smaller value of angular misalignment, na, sir?
right, right. So what is your
But
question?
sir, you have written like a smaller value of W
Hmm.
corresponds to greater tolerance.
So greater tolerance means that you can tolerate that loss,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I um,
right?
misunderstand.
Uh-huh. On the other hand, if you come at the longitudinal, sorry, transverse misalignment is inversely proportional to W. So if
Yes, sir.
W
Yes.
is small, your loss would be larger,
Yes, sir.
right? So larger value of W give you greater tolerance, right?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So if I calculate say, the transverse misalignment 0, sorry, Xi 0 or angular misalignment theta 0 giving me the same amount of loss alpha 0, for example, then from these two relations you can find out that Xi 0 would create alpha 0 loss when through this relation. I mean, the Xi 0 which will create alpha 0 loss would be given by this expression, and theta 0 angular misalignment giving the same amount of loss would be given by this, and if you multiply them, the product is independent of W. So if one tolerance increases, another tolerance decreases. So angular tolerance do not pose much. Actually, angular, as I told you earlier also, angular tolerances do not pose much problem. You can very well aligned actually in one direction, but transverse misalignment is a problem actually. So one may think that W can be increased to have large W to have large tolerance in transverse misalignment, but then bending loss increases actually. But this point I will discuss sometimes later if the time permits, that how by bending the power is lost through the fiber and what is the relation of bending loss with respect to radius, spot size, like that. So people have suggested, I mean, their experience is that optimum value of W for our at lambda is equal to 1300 nanometer. That is of the order of 5 micron. So that should be the, so this is a rough, I mean, guess. I mean, not exactly, but it's a good tool. Bolo bhai, any difficulty so far? Do you understand what is the Gaussian approximation is, and how do we calculate this loss, etc.? And this longitudinal misalignment, that I am not discussing, right? So we can leave that. But if somebody is interested, it is given in the book. So any questions so far? No? Okay.
No, sir.
So let us come to the next important thing, and which we have also discussed 2-3 times, dispersion in an optical fiber. So first of all, what are the various reasons for dispersion? And what is dispersion? That if you launch a pulse into the fiber, then as it propagates through the fiber, it gets broadened. So I launch, so for example, a 1 picosecond pulse. After traveling say 10 kilometers, it becomes a 100 picosecond. So that 99 picosecond is the dispersion. That is the broadening of the pulse. Now there are various reasons, and now we will discuss all these reasons in terms of wave optics modal field patterns. In the ray optics, we had discussed that intermodal dispersion is basically because of the fact that different rays travel different paths and they reach at different times at the output end, and so you get this broadening in the pulse. But a correct way of saying it is that different modes have different group velocities. So if you have a mode whose propagation constant is beta m is a function of omega frequency. So the group velocity is given by d omega by d beta m. And these group velocities, they are different for different modes. So when you launch a pulse, energy is coupled in all the modes depending on the overlap integral of your input field pattern to the various modal field pattern. And now these modes propagate with different group velocities, so they take different times in reaching at the output end. And so the pulse gets broadened. So this is known as intermodal dispersion. And now this intermodal dispersion can be completely removed if I select the fiber parameters in such a way that V parameter is less than 2.48 and only one mode is excited. So then there is no question of different modes actually. Only one mode is present, so there is no intermodal dispersion. And then, but we still have dispersion. And dispersion we have, why? Because each pulse has a finite bandwidth. It cannot be a single wavelength or single frequency actually. The moment you make a pulse, first of all light sources has a certain bandwidth. And secondly, when you make a pulse, when you restrict the time, I mean a finite duration of the pulse, then it has a finite bandwidth. That you can understand through Fourier analysis. So that so each mode also, even if your pulse is propagating through a single mode, it will get broadened because its group velocity is a function of omega. So different wavelengths associated with the pulse propagate with different group velocities, and so they reach at the different times and your pulse gets broadened. So let us have an estimate how this intermodal dispersion, what is the rough estimate of this dispersion, right? So what I will do, let me find out the, suppose the fiber length is L. So time of travel for this mode, that would be L divided by group velocity. Group velocity is d omega by d beta. So this time travel would be L times d beta by d omega. And this you can write down as L times d by d omega into omega by c times n effective. You remember how n effective is defined? N effective is beta upon k naught. K naught is omega by c. So omega by c times n effective. And now if you differentiate, C I will take outside, L by C. If you differentiate, so it is the differential of two functions. So differential of the first function, then you get n effective plus omega, d by d omega of n effective. Let me put this differential in terms of lambda, because finally when the bandwidth of the source is generally given in terms of wavelength spread. Although, I mean, people talk in terms of frequency spread also, but let me put it in the wavelength spread. So omega by k naught is equal to omega by c is equal to 2 pi by lambda. So omega is equal to 2 pi c by lambda. And it is a simple thing you can show. that this omega into d by d omega operator, that is nothing but minus lambda d by d lambda. So time taken by the wavelength lambda in traveling a distance L is given by L by C n effective minus lambda d by d lambda of n effective, right? So you can find out then what would be the, so I am considering a input pulse with say 0, a impulse. Let me consider a impulse. So even if you launch an impulse, that what is the broadening of this impulse? So suppose delta lambda is the bandwidth of the pulse and time t, I mean the rate of change of t with respect to lambda multiplied by bandwidth, that would be the broadening in the pulse. So this would be delta lambda L by C into minus lambda d square n effective by d lambda square. So if you differentiate it, so you will get then del d by d lambda of n effective minus, and first you differentiated product of two functions d by d. So this will cancel actually first term, and the what you will get is second derivative only minus lambda d square n effective by d lambda square. So now this is the broadening, and as you can see the pulse broadening is directly proportional to length of the fiber, and that is obvious also because if you propagate the pulse over 1 kilometer or 10 kilometer, then naturally the pulse broadening in 10 kilometer would be much larger or 10 times larger than that of in 1 kilometer. So that is fine. And then delta lambda, it certainly depends on delta lambda. Larger, if you have more bandwidth of the pulse, then the pulse dispersion would be more. So these two factors actually they are not related with the fiber characteristics as such. So what we do, we generally define dispersion coefficient. How is defined? Pulse broadening unit length of the fiber per unit bandwidth of the pulse. So this is how we define dispersion coefficient. And so this is dispersion coefficient is fixed for a fiber actually. It does not depend whether the fiber is 1 meter long or 10 meter long, and it does not depend whether the input pulse is 1 nanometer width or 2 nanometer width. So this is the, once you have fabricated the fiber, then this is the property dispersion coefficient of that fiber. And we generally measure is, I have not written here, but I should have written it in the units picosecond per kilometer nanometer. Kilometer nanometer comes in the denominator, right? So this is the dispersion coefficient. Now you can see that this is basically decided by the differential second derivative of n effective with respect to lambda. But now n effective is a function of wavelength because of two different reasons. First, that material refractive index itself is a function of lambda. Both core refractive index and cladding refractive indices, they are function of wavelength. So d square n lambda. So what I'm saying is that even if I would not have a waveguide, I mean there is no core and cladding, I just have a homogeneous medium of refractive index n, because n depends on wavelength. So d square n by d lambda square would be finite, and you will have material dispersion. So this contribution to intramodal dispersion, which is because of the fact that core and cladding indices are function of lambda, that is known as material dispersion. But then there's another component, what is known as waveguide dispersion. Now this waveguide dispersion, suppose I consider a very sort of ideal case, that in which case both core refractive index and cladding, I am sort of repeating this, I had discussed earlier also, but anyway, those who have not listened me clearly, then they should, it should be clear to them. So because n1 and n2, suppose it does not depend, they do not depend on wavelength, although it is not possible, but let me assume, okay. So what happens that, as we discussed, the power carried by you have two mediums n1 and n2, and power carried by any mode in the core as well as in cladding, and fractional modal power in the core and fractional modal power in the cladding, that is decided by the V parameter. If you remember, we had discussed that if V parameter increases, each mode confines more and more in the core, in its fractional modal power in the core increases. So as V increases, or let me say the fractional modal power in the core increases, or in terms of lambda, as lambda increases, V decreases, fractional modal power in the core decreases. So it's like that. So that contribution is known as waveguide dispersion. Although I cannot really separate them, what should I, when I calculate the dispersion coefficient, what I should do, I should solve the eigenvalue equation which we have discussed earlier. For example, I think fundamental mode eigenvalue equation was W J1 of W, so U J1 of U upon J0 is equal to W K1 W by K0, and similarly for other modes, I should solve for those eigenvalue equations. I should get U values at a given wavelength. U is related to beta, then I should find out beta. I should find out then N effective, and then I should find out the second derivative of the N effective. And that will take into account both material effect as well as waveguide effect, because when I will solve those eigenvalue equations, I will take the wavelength dependence of refractive indices of both core and cladding into account. But anyway, to have an idea that what is the sort of material contribution of material and what is the contribution of waveguide to the dispersion, intermodal dispersion, we will separate them. Although it's not 100% correct approach, but I would say 99.9% correct approach in step index fiber. It may not always in all the waveguides, but in step index fiber, it's a very good approach. So what we do, let us see how the material dispersion on what factor depends, and what is the roughly the material contribution and what is roughly the waveguide contribution. So let me estimate the material dispersion first. So actually, even if single mode fiber, V is about 2.3 or something like that, most of the power is propagating in the core. I am not giving you exact figure, but maybe 90% power is propagating through the core and 10% power is propagating through the cladding. So as such, the effect of cladding refractive index on the core mode, effective index of the fundamental mode or any mode would be, I mean, if you, you can roughly assume that N effective is almost N1, just to have an idea, right? So dm, if you calculate, that is minus lambda upon C d square N1 by d lambda square, then this comes out to be roughly 85 picosecond. And I forgot to write down the correct, let me write down it here so that I will correct it. The units I have not written correctly, and this is, let me write down here. Okay. So this is slide number 44, I think. So this should be 85 picosecond per kilometer nanometer. So if you have 1 kilometer length of the fiber and your bandwidth of the pulse is 1 nanometer at the input end, then you would have 85 picosecond pulse broadening. For silica fiber, N1 is basically silica, and if you use, there are relations available, Salem-Meyer relation or which empirical relation which give the wave refractive index as a function of wavelength for silica, and if you use them and you find out dm, then I have given you the value of material dispersion, contribution from material, that is roughly at 0.85 micron, it is 85 picosecond per kilometer nanometer. I am giving you this wavelength because the first generation optical fiber communication system, they use this light source which has lambda is equal to 0.85 micron. At that time, we didn't have efficient light sources at other wavelengths. So that time 85 picosecond per kilometer nanometer. That was the material contribution. And if you remember what was the contribution because of intermodal dispersion, in 1 kilometer we had a rough estimate, it was 15 nanosecond per kilometer. So you can see at this wavelength also, I mean if you have a multimode fiber, intermodal dispersion was much larger than that of the material dispersion, and as we will see, waveguide dispersion is even smaller actually. However, for silica material, if you plot d square n by d lambda square as a function of wavelength, then this d second derivative becomes 0 at about 1.27 micron. So around this wavelength, the material dispersion in silica fibers is extremely small, and in fact at about lambda is equal to 1.3 micron, the material dispersion is 0.1 picosecond per kilometer nanometer. So that is the great reduction in material dispersion if you operate around 1.3 micron. And that was the reason why people used this fiber for the second generation communication system. And again at 1.5 micron, this is 20 picosecond per kilometer nanometer. But as we discuss later on, then this can be reduced actually. Material dispersion, overall dispersion actually. You can design a fiber in such a way that material dispersion compensates the waveguide dispersion at higher wavelength, and you get zero dispersion at 1.5 micron. So this conventional single mode fiber which are laid down in the right now, we are most of the fibers, they are optimized at 1.3 micron, and they have a very small zero dispersion wavelength at lambda is equal to 1.3 micron. So we will come to this point, zero dispersion wavelength. So as I told you that intermodal dispersion was a great challenge actually at that time earlier, and then as I discussed in one of my lectures that people thought of graded index fiber, and there the intermodal dispersion can be reduced by a very large factor. So in order to show through wave optics also, and I will take one particular example, and because that is infinitely extended parabolic index medium, right? By infinitely extended parabolic medium, I mean that this variation, parabolic variation in the refractive index, that extends up to infinity. Although this is not true in practice, because after the core is ending, so you would have a cladding. So, but because if you have a multi-mode fiber, a large number of modes, and most lower order modes, as I told you, that their power would be confined more in the core, and so they would not be seeing the cladding much. I mean, the fractional model power of modes in the cladding would be smaller. So just to have an idea how the propagation constant look like, how the group velocities look like. So I would consider this infinitely extended medium. Why? Because somehow in this case we have analytical solution of the wave equation, and I would again consider the LP modes, linearly polarized mode, which means I would be considering the solution of a scalar wave equation. Again, the solutions I am looking for of the form amplitude, which is a function of x and y, and plane wave solution exponential I omega t minus beta z. then this scalar wave equation can be written down like this: del square psi by del x square plus del square psi by del y square plus k naught square n square of xy. This thing minus, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I should close this bracket, curly bracket here. So I should close this curly bracket here, right? Close the curly bracket. Now, this equation fortunately can be solved analytically. And again, the method of separation of variable works here. So as I discussed, what is the method of separation of variables? So we can assume psi of xy is a function of x and function of y. If you substitute this here, divide both the sides by x of x into y of y, this equation can be written down in this following form, right? Plus, terms which depends only on y, terms which depends only on x, plus k naught square n1 square minus beta square is equal to 0. And so, as we discussed earlier also, this is true for all x and y, and that is possible only when the terms involving x and terms involving y, they are separately equal to some constant actually. Otherwise, that would not be possible to satisfy this equation for all values of x and y. So let me put those constants as minus gamma 1 and minus gamma 2. So I say 1 by x d square x by dx square minus k naught square and 1 square 2 delta by a square x square is equal to minus gamma 1. And similarly, the second minus gamma 2. And if you substitute this in the equation, then what you will get? And again, I made a mistake here. I should have written down gamma 1 and gamma 2 here instead of alpha 1 and alpha 2. So that is another mistake. Alpha 1, alpha 2 should be gamma 1, gamma 2. And then you can see the beta square would be given by this. So if I can solve these equation, and fortunately I can solve these equation and obtain gamma 1 and gamma 2, then I would know the beta square. And I would stop here. Only thing I will tell you that in these equation, if you change the variable xi as alpha x, eta as alpha y, where alpha is defined by this equation, and here v is nothing but the v parameter of the waveguide. So the above two equations can be written down in the following form. And these are standard mathematical equations, which are Hermite-Gauss functions. The solutions are, and their solutions we will discuss next time. So now let me know if there is any difficulty so far. Bolo bhai.
So I just have a general question. Like this is not related to this.
Okay.
Sir, in different places of world we have like different temperature, and we know that temperature has relation with refractive index. So
Right.
sir, as the temperature changes at for some place we have really high temperature. So that affect our fiber, or that effect is compensated or something? I want to know that.
First of all, if you have a single mode fiber, then by changing the temperature, the effective refractive index would change little bit, the V parameter would change little bit. In principle, I mean, everything would change little bit.
Yes, sir.
So that's right, but that's not appreciable, right? What I mean, this effect of temperature is changes, of course, or in the modal field patterns, effective indices, and this property we use in realizing temperature sensors.
Yes,
But
sir.
if you are talking about with respect to communication, I don't think that is changing much. In any case, those fibers are laid down underground or inside a cable, they do not see much of the temperature change.
Okay, okay.
Right?
Okay, sir.
Any other question?
Sir, in slide 44, I
Okay.
think I just wanted to see the graph.
Okay,
The
you
last,
are seeing these slides?
yes, sir.
Okay, so slide this one.
Yes, sir. So when this lambda is greater than 1.27,
Mhm.
then mathematically, if we see that dm will become negative,
No,
I
dm
think.
would become positive. When d square
Sorry,
n by d
positive.
lambda square
Yes,
is
sir.
negative, then dm would be
Yes, sir.
positive. And what does
So,
it mean physically?
yes, sir.
Physically,
This,
d I am defining rate of I mean time taken. See what is d? D is dt by d lambda. Delta tau is proportional to dt by d lambda. So if dm is positive, dt by d lambda is positive, it means higher wavelengths are taking higher times. So the group velocities of higher wavelength is higher as compared to lower wavelength. If your dispersion coefficient is negative, it means your dt by d lambda is negative. So higher wavelength taking less time, higher wavelengths are traveling faster. So that is the physical meaning.
okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other question? Bolo bhai. Any other question?
Sir, have you not uploaded the previous lectures notes?
No, previous lecture actually those corrections I have to make. So today I will load both the lectures.
Okay, sir.
Hello, sir. Are you,
Bolo bhai.
sir, are you going to take quiz in Wednesday for
Yeah,
next week?
Wednesday I will take quiz and that would be from sheet 11, page number 11 to 20. That is on planar waveguide. And
Okay, sir.
we should, in some week, I mean, maybe next week it is not possible. We should have more than one quizzes because we should go with the course actually. We are lagging behind. So anyway, next week we are fixing on Wednesday. And this weekend I will try to send your quiz one paper. Any other question, difficulty?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Bolo.
Sir, my question was, sir has mentioned that as V increases, the fractional modal power in core also increases. But
Right.
as V increases, your higher order modes also increases. And for higher order modes, you have more power in cladding. So
Yeah.
fractional power in cladding.
So what I
So
am discussing is for individual mode. For each mode, as V increases, its modal power would increase in the, suppose I have V is equal to 4 and then LP01 mode is guided, LP11 mode guided, then I increase V from 4 to 5. Then fractional modal power for both the modes would increase, right? So as a
yes,
whole,
sir.
and maybe another mode is also excited. So that's right. But as a whole, the total power would increase and corresponding to any mode, the fractional modal power would also increase.
Okay, sir.
Right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Any other question? No question. So shall we stop recording? Okay. If there is no question, I stop recording. And